Life does not always speak in grand events. More often, it whispers through quiet moments, unnoticed choices, and ordinary people. In these simple stories, passed down through time and across cultures, we find reflections of ourselves, our doubts, our hopes, our faults, and our quiet strength. This collection is not a map, but a mirror. It does not claim to give answers, but invites you to pause and ask better questions. You may not remember every detail, but perhaps one story, one line, will stay with you, nudging you gently when you need it most. Because wisdom is not something we chase. It is something we return to. 21. Profound stories from the ancients. Everything has its appointed time. A philosophy of living wisely. Dear readers, there are things in life that the more you try to fix them, the more entangled they become. Sometimes, all you need is to quietly wait, to let go, and everything will naturally settle. Story 1. Do you have the strength to keep your mind still? One day, a spiritual master had business in a remote village and brought along his disciple. They were traveling on foot. Along the way, the master asked the disciple to rest under a lush green tree, its canopy shielding them from the harsh sun. In the distance, a small stream glistened. The master said, "I'm thirsty. Could you fetch me some water?" The disciple eagerly took a jug and walked to the stream. Upon arrival, he noticed the water was muddy. A herd of cattle had just crossed. He returned to the master and said, "Teacher, the water's murky because cows just walked through it. I don't think it's drinkable." The master replied gently, "All right, let's wait." 15 minutes later, the master said, "Try now." The disciple returned to the stream. The water had cleared somewhat, but was still cloudy. He came back again, a bit disappointed. It's still not clear enough. The master smiled. "That's all right. Let's wait a little longer." The master sat cross-legged, hands folded, spine straight, eyes half closed, meditating in silence beneath the tree. After half an hour, the disciple returned once more. Now the stream was crystal clear. He could see the pebbles at the bottom. He carefully scooped the clean water and brought it to his teacher. The master looked into the jug and said, "See? Now we have clear, sweet water. Some things, my child, don't need fixing. You simply have to give them time. Let the mud settle, and clarity will come on its own." Your mind is like that too. When it is turbulent and chaotic, don't rush to suppress or fix it. Just give it space and time. When angry with someone, don't dwell on them or argue. Redirect your thoughts elsewhere. The best thing is to remain quiet. Play blind, play deaf, and your mind will settle itself. The disciple responded, "But Master, in the moment of upset, I often forget how to escape it." The master nodded. "Yes, that's natural. But recognizing your mistake after is still better than never recognizing it at all." Every situation in life is a test of your inner discipline. Being calm in the face of life's many uncertainties is a sign of spiritual cultivation. To remain still requires courage. Story 2. Let things flow. The wisdom of going with the natural order. The ancients often said, "Life and death are destined, wealth and honor decreed by heaven." Many of our worries come not from what is, but from our obsession with what could be, our clinging to things we cannot control. There's a humorous tale about Tai Zong, a renowned official, writer, and calligrapher of the Northern Song dynasty. He was famous for his thick beard, and people fondly called him Mr. Finebeard. One day, someone playfully asked him, "When you sleep at night, do you keep your beard inside or outside your blanket?" The question startled Taizong. He had never thought about it. That night, he tried placing his beard inside the blanket, then outside, then switching again. He was so perplexed he couldn't sleep a wink. Eventually, he realized the folly. It had never been a problem before. The beard naturally settled wherever it would. There was no need to control it. Such is the nature of life. Sleeping, waking, breathing. They are natural processes. But the moment we become rigid and self-conscious about them, we upset their balance. When we overanalyze, overreach, or try too hard, we actually disrupt the harmony. Many people live in a state of exaggerated self-importance or relentless pursuit, and then they suffer when they don't achieve what they desire. Yet the wisest path is not to strive forcefully. It is to act with a tranquil heart, to respond to life's events as they come, not as we wish them to be. When we align with nature's rhythm, we find that things fall into place far more effectively than when we resist or manipulate. So how does one achieve this peaceful state of mind? The Tao Te Ching, written by Laozi, tells us, "Man follows the earth follows the heavens follow the Tao follows what is natural." This points to the interconnectedness of all things. Man, heaven, earth, and the Tao must live in harmony, each moving in step with the other. A person guided by the Tao holds inner principles, a sense of right and wrong, a conscience, and does not act out of fear or greed, but with dignity and clarity. Thus, within Taoism and Buddhism, there is the notion of protecting the way, meaning we uphold what is true and natural. We protect the moral fabric of the universe not through force, but through living in alignment with it. Some skeptics ask, if gods or Buddhas exist, why do they allow suffering in the world? The answer is not that divine beings are indifferent. Rather, they respect the natural laws, the law of cause and effect. Good brings reward. Evil brings consequence. Even divine help does not violate this principle. The heavens do not simply wave away our hardships. There's a parable about a beggar who entered a temple and saw a statue of the Bodhisattva seated serenely upon a lotus, receiving offerings. In awe, the beggar asked, "Can I sit in your place just for a while?" The Bodhisattva replied, "You may, but only if you do not speak a word." The beggar agreed and took the seat. From that vantage point, he saw many come to pray, most seeking wealth, health, or answers. He endured the noise in silence. One day, a wealthy man came and prayed for virtue. As he bowed, his purse fell to the floor. The beggar wanted to speak, but remembered the Bodhisattva's condition. Later, a poor man entered and prayed for money to help his sick family. As he got up, he saw the purse and with joy exclaimed, "The Bodhisattva has answered me." He left with the purse. The beggar again restrained himself. Soon after, a fisherman entered and prayed for safe passage at sea. As he left, the rich man returned, realized his purse was gone, and accused the fisherman of stealing. A violent scuffle broke out. Unable to bear it, The beggar finally shouted, "Stop!" and explained everything. The bodhisattva returned and said, "You think you did the right thing, but consider this. The poor man with that money could have saved his family. The rich man, in losing it, might have learned humility and virtue. The fisherman, delayed by the fight, would have missed the storm at sea. By speaking, you disrupted the order." And then he said, "Return to your life, for you still do not understand the meaning of surrender." True surrender to nature does not mean passivity or indifference. It means trusting the process, the divine order, while fulfilling your role with integrity. Even the sun and moon move tirelessly to sustain life. So must we. But not with anxiety, with faithful effort. The Tao rewards those who persist, not those who sit idle, expecting reward. Do your part, act without obsession, give your best with humility, and leave the rest to the natural unfolding of the universe. Story 3. The kind of person who is always lucky. One morning, a woman discovered that the front tire of her motorbike had gone completely flat. She sighed in mild frustration, but quickly thought, "How fortunate. If the tire had burst while I was on the highway, who knows what might have happened." Because she had to walk the bike to a repair shop, she arrived 15 minutes late to work. The deputy manager told her the director wanted to see her. She took a deep breath and braced herself. If it was to reprimand her for being late, she would accept it with humility, no excuses. But to her surprise, the director didn't mention her lateness. Instead, he asked for her understanding. "You were scheduled to receive a raise today," he said, "but due to the government's cuts in public investment, over 41 trillion dong, one of our company's projects has been affected. Our finances are strained, so we've had to delay a few salary increases. You will still receive it, just a little later." She returned to her desk, not in disappointment, but with a quiet sense of relief. How lucky, she thought. Many companies are slashing salaries or laying off employees, yet mine will still honor our raises when things improve. And beyond that, she felt grateful to work for a kind and respectful director, something not everyone can say. That evening, she bought seafood and prepared a special dinner for her family to celebrate, the 3 blessings of the day. The next day, on his way home from work, her husband was sideswiped by a reckless driver weaving through traffic. He fell hard. Later, when he told her the story, the bruises, the scrapes, she gasped and then smiled. Lucky again. He's still alive. He didn't break any bones. We didn't end up in the emergency room. She made another hearty dinner to celebrate their new fortune. In this way, she was a woman who always seemed to be lucky. But the truth is, her luck did not come from fate. It came from a way of seeing the world. It wasn't just a cheerful attitude. It was a philosophy. She chose to find the silver lining in every storm cloud, the blessing in every burden. She trained herself not to pretend things were perfect, but to recognize that peace can coexist with hardship. Because of this mindset, her family rarely heard complaints or sighs of despair. Her laughter was a daily presence. Her optimism wasn't forced. It was practiced. And it made her beloved among her co-workers, her neighbors, and her friends. Her life flowed more smoothly, not because it was easier, but because she carried herself with grace and gratitude. Though she was nearly 40, she appeared vibrant as someone 10 years younger. Optimism keeps the heart light, the spirit agile. Such a life is not naive, it is wise. It understands that joy is not given, it is cultivated. A happy person is not someone who lives without difficulty. It is someone who responds to difficulty without bitterness. To live joyfully is a sign of true intelligence and even deeper of a moral character that honors life itself. Story 4. The Ferryman's Daughter and the Monk, a lesson in the mind's eye. In this story, we encounter a truth as old as the river itself, that the mind shapes our reality more than any outward glance or gesture. A monk once needed to cross a river and boarded a small ferry operated by a young woman. After reaching the opposite bank, the ferryman's daughter collected fares from each passenger. When she reached the monk, she asked for double. The monk was surprised. "Why double?" She smiled and answered, "Because you looked at me." The monk said nothing, paid the fare, and stepped ashore. Sometime later, the monk had to cross the river again. This time, after they reached the other side, the girl charged him triple. "Why triple?" the monk asked. She replied, still smiling, "This time, you looked at me through the water." Again, the monk paid silently and walked away. A third time, the monk returned to the riverbank. This time, as soon as he stepped onto the ferry, he closed his eyes and entered a state of meditation. When they reached the other side, the ferry girl asked for 5 times the regular fare. The monk opened his eyes and asked, "Why 5 times?" She said, "You didn't look at me with your eyes, but your mind was still thinking of me." The monk said nothing, paid, and left. Finally, one day, the monk returned once more, but this time he looked directly at the ferryman's daughter, calm, clear, without distraction. As they arrived at the far shore, the monk smiled and asked, "And how much today?" She bowed slightly and said, "Today, I offer you the ride freely." The monk asked, "Why?" She replied, "Because now, when you look, you no longer think of me. You see, and that is all. You are free." The lesson is simple, but not easy. All things come from the mind. It is not the eye that binds us to desire, but the thoughts we allow to cling. A glance is nothing unless it is tethered to longing. In life, only the heart, the true mind, is of real value. And as the story shows us, it is not just about how we appear to others, but how we see, how we perceive, how we think. The mind, though unseen, shapes the whole of human experience. Think on this. A distorted heart brings confusion to life. A dishonest heart brings unease. A jealous heart brings hatred. An envious heart erodes joy. A greedy heart distorts truth. Therefore, we should place our heart not only upon our chest for love, but in our hands to serve others, in our eyes to see their suffering, on our foreheads to hurry toward the struggling, on our lips to offer comfort, in our ears to truly listen, and upon our shoulders to carry shared burdens. It is not the body that binds us to this world, but the clinging heart. One may shut the eyes and still be overwhelmed by waves of thought. True freedom comes not from fleeing the world, but from seeing it clearly and not being moved. This crossing, the monk's journey across the river, is not just physical. It is a metaphor for the soul's movement from entanglement to liberation. First he clings with his eyes, then with his thoughts, and finally, he lets go. When we no longer grasp, life no longer burdens. And when we look at the world without wanting, we are, at last, at peace. Story 5, Endurance, a Quiet Power, Forged by Practice. There once lived a young man known for his temper, quick to anger, quicker to strike. He fought often, and many avoided him for fear of his wrath. One day, while wandering, he happened upon a monastery. There, a Zen master was giving a talk. The young man paused, curious, and as he listened, something shifted inside him. The words touched a nerve long buried. After the talk, he approached the master and said, "From this day on, I will change. I will not fight again. Even if someone spits on my face, I will simply wipe it off and remain calm." The master looked at him gently, smiled, and replied, "Why wipe it off? Let it dry on its own." The young man was stunned. "How could anyone bear that?" he asked. The master replied, "Is there truly harm in letting it be? It's like a grain of salt blown onto your cheek. Does that warrant a fight?" Still unconvinced, the young man pressed further. "And what if someone strikes me with a fist instead of spitting?" The master calmly responded, "Then treat it the same. Don't take it to heart. It's only a fist." In that moment, frustrated by what he perceived as passivity, the young man raised his own hand and struck the master on the head. "And now?" he demanded. "How does that feel?" The master, unshaken, replied softly, "My head is like stone. I feel no pain. But your hand? It must hurt, doesn't it?" The young man stood frozen. There was no rebuke, no anger, only kindness. And that was the teaching. Endurance is not weakness. It is a deep, steady power, one that must be trained. The great master Huang Yi once said, "In crowded cities, when surrounded by fools, when faced with chaos or contradiction, these are the moments where people erupt in anger. But such outbursts often bring regret and ruin. To endure is not to lose, but to triumph in silence. To endure a moment of provocation brings calm. To step back in a storm gives you the sky. There are times when silence is the most powerful answer, and when patience is the greatest form of courage. Yes, it hurts to hold back, but over time, that pain transforms into strength. People often confuse endurance with weakness. They think the one who walks away is afraid, but in truth, the one who endures has already won, not against others, but against themselves. In this world, to remain unshaken amidst chaos, to stay poised under pressure, to be unmoved by insult or praise, that is mastery. Those who lack patience are easily broken, but those who cultivate it can withstand even the fiercest storms. And so, if your heart burns when slighted, and you are tempted to lash out, breathe. Wait. Let it pass. There is great strength in restraint. Endurance, rightly practiced, is not suppression. It is wisdom in motion. Story 6. The teacher who protected a child's dignity. At a wedding reception, a young man spotted a familiar face among the crowd, his former elementary school teacher. With heartfelt emotion, he walked over and greeted him warmly. "Teacher," he said, "do you remember me?" The old man looked closely. "I'm afraid I don't. Tell me who you are." The young man began, voice trembling slightly. I was in your third grade class. One day, I stole a classmate's watch. I thought it was so beautiful. And I took it. The boy cried and told you what happened. You asked the class to stand up. I was terrified. I thought, this is it. Everyone will know I'm a thief. I'll be disgraced in front of the whole school. But you asked us to face the wall and close our eyes. Then you went through our pockets one by one. When you found the watch in my pocket, you said nothing. You continued checking every other student as if you hadn't found it yet. Afterward, you simply held up the watch, returned it, and moved on. You never said a word to me. Not that day, not ever. No one else knew. You didn't shame me, scold me, or expose me. I never forgot that day, he continued. You protected me, not just from others, but from the weight of my own mistake. You gave me a chance to become better, and I did. Because of you, I turned my life around. Tears welled up in the teacher's eyes. He placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. My son, he said softly, I didn't remember you because I closed my own eyes while searching your pockets. That simple act, to not see, to not judge, had preserved a child's dignity and altered the course of his life. There's a kind of greatness that doesn't shout. It doesn't lecture. It doesn't punish. It simply offers grace in the moment of someone else's worst mistake. The most powerful teachers do not just teach lessons, they give second chances. They see not just what we are, but who we could become. And sometimes the truest wisdom lies not in speaking truth, but in knowing when silence is more merciful. Story 7. The more you know, the quieter you become. In a quiet village, a father and son went for a walk into the forest on a clear day. The father paused on a winding trail and said, Son, listen carefully. What do you hear? The boy tilted his head and answered, I hear the birds singing. Good, said the father. Now listen more deeply. What else? The boy focused harder. There's a wagon, a wooden cart coming this way. The father nodded. Yes. And what kind of cart is it? The boy was puzzled. How would I know that? It's empty, the father said, smiling. You can tell by the sound. Loud, rattling, clumsy. A full cart rolls quietly. An empty one makes the most noise. Years passed, and the boy grew into a man, successful, intelligent, and respected. But every time he met someone loud and boastful, someone eager to prove their worth by words alone, he would recall that day in the woods. The emptier the cart, the louder the noise. It's the same with people. Those who lack depth often fill the air with opinions and self-importance. But the truly wise, they speak little. And when they do, their words carry weight. The deeper the water, the stiller it flows. A shallow stream chatters and splashes. A deep river runs silent. The same is true in the fields. The ripest grain bows its head. The proudest stalks are often empty. The art of humility isn't pretending you know less. It's knowing how much more there is to learn. It's recognizing the limits of one's own insight. It's the patience to listen, the discipline to hold back, the grace to let others shine. People with still minds are not easily provoked. They don't quarrel needlessly. They weigh their words and honor their silence. So, ask yourself, Do you want to be a shallow stream, loud and rushing, or a deep well, calm and steady? In this world, humility is not submission. It is strength without the need for display, and those who master it earn a peace that noise can never reach. Story 8. Finding Stillness in the Storm. Once a king announced a grand contest across his kingdom. He invited the finest artists to submit paintings on a single theme, peace. Many artists entered. One by one, their paintings were unveiled. Soft landscapes, gentle skies, quiet lakes. Among them, one painting seemed to win everyone's admiration. It showed a mirror-still lake reflecting towering green mountains under a flawless, cloudless sky. Birds glided gently above. Surely, this, people thought, was the embodiment of peace. But the king was not satisfied. Then he revealed a second painting, and the crowd gasped. This one showed a violent storm. Jagged mountains loomed under a dark, swirling sky. Rain slashed sideways. Lightning ripped through the clouds. Below, a foaming waterfall roared down the cliff face, thundering into a pool of churning water. It looked anything but peaceful. But the king pointed to a small detail easily overlooked. Tucked behind the waterfall, wedged into a crevice in the rock, was a tiny bush. And nestled safely within it, a bird calmly feeding its young, unfazed by the chaos around it. This, said the king, is true peace. Because real peace is not the absence of noise, trouble, or struggle. It is the presence of calm in the middle of it. Anyone can feel serene when skies are clear. But to remain steady while storms rage, that is peace earned, not given. We live in a noisy world, schedules packed tight, relationships strained, expectations rising like floodwaters, and too often we search for peace by trying to control or escape the chaos. But the wise learn another way, to carry stillness inside them. Peace isn't found by avoiding life's messiness. It's found by anchoring ourselves so deeply within that even the winds cannot sway us. So how do we build that anchor? By not rushing to judgment, by not panicking at first failure, by letting time speak before we speak, by practicing stillness, even in the swirl of modern life. And when we learn to do that, we become like the bird behind the waterfall, sheltering life in the middle of the storm, untouched by its fury. That is the kind of peace worth seeking. Story 9. Why Life Feels So Tiring. One day, a weary young man arrived at an old monastery. His face was worn, his posture slouched, and his spirit clearly burdened. The elderly monk who greeted him asked gently, "My child, what troubles you?" The young man sighed. "To everyone else, I look like a success. I have friends, and accomplishments. But inside, I feel exhausted, as if I'm carrying something heavy that no one else sees." The monk smiled kindly. "Come, let me tell you a story. Perhaps it will speak to you." He began. A group of former students, now grown and accomplished, came back to visit their old professor. After exchanging memories, they soon fell into complaints about their lives. The stress, the pressure, the endless expectations. The professor listened quietly. Then he went to the kitchen and returned with a large pot of coffee and an assortment of cups. Some fine porcelain, some simple clay, others plastic and glass. Some cups were ornate, others plain. All were clean. He invited them to pour themselves coffee. As each guest selected a cup, the professor observed that most reached for the more elegant ones, the fine china, the polished mugs, leaving behind the simplest vessels. He waited, then said, "You've all chosen the best-looking cups, and that's natural. But do you see what you've done? The cup you're drinking from doesn't change the taste of the coffee. Yet you instinctively went for the ones that looked better. Just as in life, we chase after status, wealth, and image, believing they are the essence of life. But the coffee, that's life itself. And the cup, that's just the wrapping." The sad part is, while we focus so much on the cup, we forget to enjoy the coffee. The students fell silent. Some looked at their hands, others nodded slowly. "Remember," the professor said, "life is the coffee. Jobs, money, appearance, they are only the cups. Let's not confuse the two." The young man sat in silence after the story. Something in him had shifted. The weight on his shoulders wasn't work or responsibility. It was the mistaken belief that fulfillment came from the cup, not the coffee. We exhaust ourselves chasing what looks good instead of savoring what is good. And so the monk told him one final truth. You are not tired because life is too hard. You are tired because you are holding too tightly to the wrong things. Let go. Refill your cup. And this time, taste the coffee. Story 10. Laziness. The fastest way to ruin a life. There was once a teacher who took his students to visit a desperately poor family in a rural village. 8 people lived together in a dilapidated shack. Their faces were pale, their clothes threadbare, and their food barely enough to survive. This family owned only one asset of value, a dairy cow. They relied on its milk to sell or trade, and it sustained them just enough to make it to the next day. Many kind-hearted people had tried to help them. Some donated money, others offered jobs. But no matter what was offered, the family remained poor, too dependent on the cow, too unwilling to change. Before leaving, the teacher did something unexpected. Late at night, while the village slept, he led the cow away and let it loose into the wilderness. When the students asked why, he said nothing. A year later, the teacher brought the same group of students back. They were astonished. The shack was gone. In its place stood a sturdy home. The family looked healthier, happier, more alive. What happened? The students asked. As it turned out, after losing their cow, the family had been forced to act. With no other choice, they began cultivating vegetables, raising chickens, working odd jobs. Slowly but surely, they built a better life. What had once seemed like their only means of survival had, in fact, been their greatest trap. The cow, their source of comfort, was the chain that kept them poor. They had confused survival with success, and the safety of their one cow had made them lazy, complacent, and afraid of trying more. Only when that false comfort was gone were they free to grow. This is true for many of us. We cling to our cows, the job we don't love, the habits that dull us, the excuses that protect our ego. We stay where it's safe, even when we're slowly dying inside. But progress never comes from comfort. In life, if you're not moving forward, you're slipping backward. Comfort becomes decay. Safety becomes stagnation. The truth is this: if you're too comfortable today, your future will likely be hard. But if you push yourself today, your future can be rich with meaning. Laziness doesn't strike suddenly. It creeps in as rest, as convenience, as "I'll do it tomorrow." And before you know it, your ambition has atrophied. Don't wait to lose your cow. Choose to grow before life forces you to. The teacher taught his students not just a lesson in poverty, but in mindset. Don't let your only cow define the size of your life. The cow may feed you today, but it will starve your dreams tomorrow. Story 10. Laziness. The fastest way to ruin a life. There was once a teacher who took his students to visit a desperately poor family in a rural village. 8 people lived together in a dilapidated shack. Their faces were pale, their clothes threadbare, and their food barely enough to survive. This family owned only one asset of value, a dairy cow. They relied on its milk to sell or trade, and it sustained them just enough to make it to the next day. Many kind-hearted people had tried to help them. Some donated money, others offered jobs. But no matter what was offered, the family remained poor, too dependent on the cow, too unwilling to change. Before leaving, the teacher did something unexpected. Late at night, while the village slept, he led the cow away and let it loose into the wilderness. When the students asked why, he said nothing. A year later, the teacher brought the same group of students back. They were astonished. The shack was gone. In its place stood a sturdy home. The family looked healthier, happier, more alive. "What happened?" the students asked. As it turned out, after losing their cow, the family had been forced to act. With no other choice, they began cultivating vegetables, raising chickens, working odd jobs. Slowly but surely, they built a better life. What had once seemed like their only means of survival had in fact been their greatest trap. The cow, their source of comfort, was the chain that kept them poor. They had confused survival with success. And the safety of their one cow had made them lazy, complacent, and afraid of trying more. Only when that false comfort was gone were they free to grow. This is true for many of us. We cling to our cows, the job we don't love, the habits that dull us, the excuses that protect our ego. We stay where it's safe, even when we're slowly dying inside. But progress never comes from comfort. In life, if you're not moving forward, you're slipping backward. Comfort becomes decay. Safety becomes stagnation. The truth is this: if you're too comfortable today, your future will likely be hard. But if you push yourself today, your future can be rich with meaning. Laziness doesn't strike suddenly. It creeps in as rest, as convenience, as "I'll do it tomorrow." And before you know it, your ambition has atrophied. Don't wait to lose your cow. Choose to grow before life forces you to. The teacher taught his students not just a lesson in poverty, but in mindset. Don't let your only cow define the size of your life. The cow may feed you today, but it will starve your dreams tomorrow. Story 12. The kind of person even fortune tellers cannot predict. It is said that everyone has a destiny, a path carved by time, written in the stars, etched into our palms. Yet, as the poet Nguyen Du once wrote, human will can triumph over heaven. So is fate fixed, or can it be moved by the heart? In the summer of 1981, during a sweltering day, a mother and her children were strolling through the city. She had planned to visit a bookstore to find a new knitting manual. As they passed through a corridor, an elderly fortune teller beckoned to her. "Madam," he said, "may I read your fortune?" She declined politely, shaking her head. She didn't believe in such things, but her children, moved by pity, said, "Please let him read your palm, Mom. Maybe it'll help him buy some food." Touched by their kindness, she agreed. The fortune teller took her hand, then the hands of each child. His face clouded. His hands trembled. Finally, he said, "There is no need to read further. Fate cannot be changed." The mother insisted on paying him anyway. He accepted reluctantly, murmuring to the children, "Heaven has no eyes. Heaven has no eyes." The family walked on, puzzled. Later that day, they passed a public square where a crowd had gathered. At the center knelt a desperate mother, begging for money to save her ill son. Without hesitation, the children said, "Mom, help her. You always help people." So she did. She gave what she had and rallied others to do the same. They went to the hospital and covered the boy's medical costs. Her children beamed with pride. A month passed. Then one day something strange happened. Ants, by the thousands, marched into their home. The children were frightened, but the mother said gently, "They're guests. We must not harm them." She built small bridges out of stools and sprinkled sugar and water to feed them, honoring even these smallest lives. Then came the fire. While she was away, a terrible blaze engulfed their apartment building. Flames devoured nearly everything. She rushed to the scene, heart pounding, screaming for her children. Miraculously, they were found, dazed, coughing from smoke, but alive. And even stranger, though the fire had destroyed nearly every floor, their room, packed with books, remained untouched. Firefighters were stunned. "This room should have gone up like tinder," they said. "It's like it disappeared from the blaze." Later, when they visited the fortune teller again, he was overcome with emotion. "You're alive?" he gasped. "But you were meant to die. All of you. The fire. It was in your fate." And then, tears streaming, he said, "I saw it in your hands. I saw the death of children. That's why I wept. That's why I said heaven had no eyes." But heaven, it turns out, does have eyes. For virtue. Because sometimes fate bows before kindness. That fire had been written in their stars, but their goodness, the compassion for a stranger, the mercy for ants, the generosity of the heart, rewrote the story. You see, in this world, we often think we control everything, but we do not. And yet, the opposite is also true. Sometimes, the smallest good deed shifts the course of a future we cannot see. Destiny may be drawn in ink, but love and virtue can still take up the pen. Story 13. When you are wronged, it's the fire that forges the gold. There once was a young intellectual born into a comfortable life who had never known hard labor or real suffering. But one day, due to political change, he was sent to the countryside for re-education through labor. His new life was harsh and humbling. Each day, he carried sacks of grain and pesticide weighing over 85 kilograms up steep hills. His hands blistered, his back ached, and his pride was stripped bare. He could barely keep his eyes open at night, yet he endured it all without complaint. He remembered the words of a beloved teacher: "Whatever you face, no matter how unfair, how painful, never lose your sense of wonder. Don't let the world take away your love for life." Later, he was transferred to a remote mountain outpost where his job was even stranger: to observe and document the growth of potato plants. Each morning, he walked alone through fields soaked in dew, gently picking wildflowers to study. He pressed them into jars, sketched their forms, and wrote delicate verses beside them. Sitting before a flower, eyes as bright as a lake, alone among the potato fields, from blossom to root, even the vines tell their story. He was still exiled, still treated as less than others, but he chose to live fully anyway, finding beauty in monotony, peace in solitude, dignity in silence. Eventually, his name was cleared, his innocence acknowledged. He returned home not just vindicated, but transformed. The man who had arrived in chains walked away freer than ever before. You see, in life, each of us will face moments when we are judged unfairly, cast aside, or falsely accused. No one escapes this, but how we respond, that is where our character is revealed. Some people crumble under injustice. Others turn bitter. But the wisest know, being wronged is not the end of you. It's the fire that refines you. Gold is not afraid of fire, and neither is the soul that knows its worth. So when you are wronged, don't waste energy proving others wrong. Instead, stay true. Let your work speak. Let your life speak. In time, the truth will rise, and so will you. Story 14. The Man Who Failed. Until one woman believed he had no college degree, no polished resume, just a young man from a humble family with little direction. His parents arranged for him to marry, and soon after, he took a job as a substitute teacher at a local elementary school. Within a week, he was dismissed. He lacked experience, confidence, and the job slipped through his fingers. He came home defeated, but his wife, gently wiping away his tears, said, "It's all right. Maybe this just isn't the thing for you. Something better will come." Then he tried factory work, but he was too slow. The supervisor fired him. He trudged home again, ashamed. But his wife only said, "You just started. They've been doing this for years. You'll find your place." And again, he tried. Each job ended in failure. Each time, he came home with sagging shoulders, afraid he had let her down. And each time, her answer was the same: calm, kind, unshaken. Finally, at age 30, he found work as a counselor at a school for the hearing impaired. He had always been good with words, and now he learned to use them in silence. From there, he opened a school for the disabled, then another. Eventually, he opened shops and centers for people with physical limitations all across the country. He became a successful entrepreneur, worth millions. One day, reflecting on his journey, he turned to his wife and asked, "Back when I was a failure, with nothing to show, why did you keep believing in me?" She smiled and said, "Because I knew. Even land that can't grow wheat can still grow beans. If not beans, then melons. If not melons, then wildflowers. Every piece of earth has its seed. It only needs time and the right hands." And that was it. Her unwavering belief. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady as the earth, because belief is not a feeling, it is a choice. A seed planted again and again, even in barren soil. From her patience grew his courage. From her quiet love came his success. No one is truly useless. No land is unworthy of harvest. No soul is beyond hope, only waiting for the right light, the right water, the right season. And so he realized his wife had been the seed all along. Her love, her loyalty, her wisdom. They were the roots of everything he had become. Story 14. The man who failed until one woman believed. He had no college degree, no polished resume, just a young man from a humble family with little direction. His parents arranged for him to marry, and soon after, he took a job as a substitute teacher at a local elementary school. Within a week, he was dismissed. He lacked experience, confidence, and the job slipped through his fingers. He came home defeated. But his wife, gently wiping away his tears, said, "It's all right. Maybe this just isn't the thing for you. Something better will come." Then he tried factory work, but he was too slow. The supervisor fired him. He trudged home again, ashamed. But his wife only said, "You just started. They've been doing this for years. You'll find your place." And again, he tried. Each job ended in failure. Each time he came home with sagging shoulders, afraid he had let her down. And each time, her answer was the same: calm, kind, unshaken. Finally, at age 30, he found work as a counselor at a school for the hearing impaired. He had always been good with words, and now he learned to use them in silence. From there, he opened a school for the disabled, then another. Eventually, he opened shops and centers for people with physical limitations all across the country. He became a successful entrepreneur, worth millions. One day, reflecting on his journey, he turned to his wife and asked, "Back when I was a failure, with nothing to show, why did you keep believing in me?" She smiled and said, "Because I knew. Even land that can't grow wheat can still grow beans. If not beans, then melons. If not melons, then wildflowers. Every piece of earth has its seed. It only needs time and the right hands." And that was it. Her unwavering belief. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady as the earth. Because belief is not a feeling, it is a choice. A seed planted again and again, even in barren soil. From her patience grew his courage. From her quiet love came his success. No one is truly useless. No land is unworthy of harvest. No soul is beyond hope, only waiting for the right light, the right water, the right season. And so he realized his wife had been the seed all along. Her love, her loyalty, her wisdom, they were the roots of everything he had become. Story 16. A few simple words that changed a life. There are many kinds of power in this world. Some are loud, others are quiet. But perhaps the most enduring is this: the power of sincere encouragement, spoken when someone needs it most. One day on a busy street, a mother was seen scolding her young son, no older than 6 or 7. Her voice rose above the crowd. "You're so stupid, so useless. What good are you?" The boy hung his head in silence, shame pressed into his tiny shoulders. To the mother, it was a passing moment of anger. To the boy, it was a brand. And brands can last a lifetime. Words are not neutral. They either lift or wound. And in childhood, they cut deepest. Years later, A man named Malcolm Delacave, now a successful writer, would tell this story. "When I was young," he said, "I was shy. I had no friends, no confidence. I believed I had no talent, no value. Then one day, his 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. Brown, gave the class a creative writing assignment. They were to read a novel and write their own ending. Malcolm worked hard on his version and turned it in, unsure of himself. Later, when the papers were returned, he found a short note scrawled in red ink in the margins. Very well written. That was it. 4 words. But to Malcolm, they were everything. Until I read those words, he said, I didn't know who I was. But that day I realized I could write. I could be someone. He went home and began writing short stories, not for school, but for himself. Over time, he brought them to Mrs. Brown, who read each one carefully and offered feedback. Real, thoughtful feedback. Not just praise, but guidance. Later, she appointed him editor of the school paper. It was the first time Malcolm felt trusted, respected, seen. Decades later, now a best-selling author, Malcolm returned to his old school for a reunion. He found Mrs. Brown, now retired, and told her how her 4 simple words had changed the course of his life. Tears welled in her eyes. He said, "Because you believed in me, I believed in myself. And because of that, I became who I was meant to be." He then shared one more detail. A young woman had recently come to him for advice. She had been struggling to finish high school. Now, she had her diploma, and dreams of writing too. That young woman was now his wife. "You didn't just change my life," he told Mrs. Brown. "You gave me the tools to change hers." In the end, he said, encouragement is a form of love. It's a bridge across someone's darkness. One compliment may be forgotten, but the right words, at the right moment, can echo for a lifetime. Story 17. The Weight of a Rattan Basket. A lesson in filial piety. There was once a man who lived with his aging father and his young son, 3 generations under one roof. The father had grown old, frail, and forgetful. His hands trembled. He moved slowly. He spilled food at dinner and repeated himself often. One day, the middle-aged man turned to his son and said, "Your grandfather is old and useless. He no longer contributes anything. Tomorrow, we'll carry him deep into the mountains and leave him there. It's better this way." The next night, under the cover of darkness, the man and his son loaded the old man into a large bamboo basket and began the long walk up a forest trail. When they reached a steep ridge, the father said, "Help me lift the basket. It's time." But the boy paused and asked, "Father, why are we throwing the basket away too?" His father frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," the boy said innocently, "if we throw the basket away, what will I use to carry you here when you get old?" The father stood frozen, struck by a sudden, silent truth. His son had spoken with a child's logic, but a philosopher's clarity, and in that moment, he saw the future reflected in his own actions. Wordlessly, he turned around. They carried the grandfather back down the mountain and vowed never again to treat him as a burden. We live in a world that prizes speed, beauty, and productivity. But age, the slowing, the stammering, the sagging of life, is often viewed as an inconvenience. And yet, when we were helpless children, it was they who fed us, carried us, cleaned us, stayed up all night when we were sick. They were patient with our weakness, tender with our needs. But when the roles reverse, when they become like children, we forget. We say they're too slow, too stubborn, too clumsy. We lose our patience. We speak harshly. We forget the debt that cannot be repaid. Each old man is just a child who has lived longer. Each parent is a mirror of what we too shall become. The tragedy is not that people grow old. The tragedy is that we grow indifferent. To care for our elders is not an obligation. It is a sacred privilege, a way of honoring life, of remembering who we are. Because one day, we too will sit at that same table, our hands shaking, hoping someone will still love us enough to lift the spoon when we can no longer do it. Story 18. What are we really chasing in this life? Human life, the sages say, is like a fleeting dream. Some wake early, wiser for it. Others sleepwalk until the end, always searching, always yearning, never quite satisfied. One of the most common traits in human beings is this: we long for what we don't have and take for granted what we do. Only when we lose something do we suddenly see how precious it was. And by then, often, it's too late. There was once a wealthy businessman known for his success and ambition, yet he carried a peculiar habit. Every few months, he would take his family to the local crematorium. There, they would quietly stand and watch, not morbidly, but mindfully. When asked why, he simply said, "Because here my mind settles, my heart slows down." At the crematorium, he explained, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, powerful or unknown. Everyone ended the same way, lying still, silent, reduced to ash. It didn't matter whether you wore silk or rags in life, whether you drove a luxury car or walked barefoot. In the end, the fire received everyone equally. And what remained was not your title or your bank account, but a small urn wrapped in a cloth. The businessman would turn to his children and say, "Don't be fooled. None of it comes with you. Learn to see through the smoke now, before you become it." This is not a call to give up on ambition. It is a reminder to choose wisely what we are ambitious for. We chase fame, wealth, validation, but why? What if instead of chasing more, we cherished better? What if we gave more attention to presence than possession, to love than labels, to meaning than medals? Because in the end, all of it, the accolades, the arguments, the anxieties, vanish like breath on glass. Life is short. But that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is spending it chasing illusions, while the real treasures, connection, peace, gratitude, sit quietly, waiting to be noticed. And so the old businessman, though wealthy, was truly rich, because he had learned to let go before life made him do so. So pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what am I really chasing? And is it worth the price of my only life? Story 18. What are we really chasing in this life? Human life, the sages say, is like a fleeting dream. Some wake early, wiser for it. Others sleepwalk until the end, always searching, always yearning, never quite satisfied. One of the most common traits in human beings is this: we long for what we don't have and take for granted what we do. Only when we lose something do we suddenly see how precious it was, and by then, often, it's too late. There was once a wealthy businessman known for his success and ambition, yet he carried a peculiar habit. Every few months, he would take his family to the local crematorium. There, they would quietly stand and watch, not morbidly, but mindfully. When asked why, he simply said, "Because here, my mind settles. My heart slows down." At the crematorium, he explained, it didn't matter if you were rich or poor, powerful or unknown. Everyone ended the same way, lying still, silent, reduced to ash. It didn't matter whether you wore silk or rags in life, whether you drove a luxury car or walked barefoot. In the end, the fire received everyone equally, and what remained was not your title or your bank account, but a small urn wrapped in a cloth. The businessman would turn to his children and say, "Don't be fooled. None of it comes with you. Learn to see through the smoke now, before you become it." This is not a call to give up on ambition. It is a reminder to choose wisely what we are ambitious for. We chase fame, wealth, validation. But why? What if, instead of chasing more, we cherished better? What if we gave more attention to presence than possession, to love than labels, to meaning than medals? Because in the end, all of it, the accolades, the arguments, the anxieties, vanish like breath on glass. Life is short. But that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is spending it chasing illusions, while the real treasures, connection, peace, gratitude, sit quietly, waiting to be noticed. And so the old businessman, though wealthy, was truly rich, because he had learned to let go before life made him do so. So pause, breathe, ask yourself, what am I really chasing? And is it worth the price of my only life? Story 20. The Broken Bowl. Why some things cannot be undone. In a quiet village nestled among rice fields, there lived a wise elder known simply as Grandfather Hua. People came to him with all kinds of troubles: business disputes, family tensions, questions of love and faith. He rarely gave answers. Instead, he told stories. One morning, a young man came running to him, face pale and breath short. "Grandfather, I've made a terrible mistake. In anger, I said cruel things to my wife. I accused her falsely, and now she's gone. I apologized, but she won't come back. Tell me what I can do to fix it." Grandfather Hua said nothing. Instead, he stood, walked into his modest kitchen, and returned with a porcelain rice bowl, smooth, elegant, perfectly shaped. He handed it to the young man and said, "Drop it." The man hesitated, then let the bowl fall. It shattered into white shards across the floor. "Now," Grandfather said, "put it back together." The man knelt, trying to fit the pieces. Some were too small, some edges didn't match. Even when he managed to hold them together, the bowl leaked and trembled in his hands. "It's no use," he said quietly. "It's broken." Grandfather Hua sat beside him. "You see," he said, "there are things in life that can be forgiven, but not undone. Words are like arrows. Once loosed, they do not return. Trust, like porcelain, is strong, but once cracked, it never returns to what it was. We are taught how to climb, how to build, how to win, but rarely are we taught how to be careful. We underestimate the power of our words, our silence, our temper. We act as if we have infinite chances, but hearts are not made of stone. And some people will walk away, not because they don't love you, but because they can no longer bear the weight of being wounded again. That is why, the elder said, we must live with greater awareness. Speak not just from impulse, but from intention. Choose truth over pride. And when you are wrong, apologize swiftly, not to be forgiven, but because it is right. The bowl may be broken, but the hands that broke it can still learn to be gentle. Regret is not the enemy. Denial is. We cannot undo what is done, but we can choose how we live from this moment forward, and that may be the beginning of a different story. Story 21. What you leave behind. The house you build with your soul. There was once a skilled carpenter, widely respected for the homes he crafted. His hands were steady, his eye precise, and his reputation impeccable. After decades of work, he decided it was time to retire. He visited the company owner, his longtime employer, and said, "I've built houses for others my entire life. Now I'd like to rest and enjoy time with my family." The owner paused, then said, "I understand, but I have one last request. Please build just one more house as a personal favor to me." Reluctantly, the carpenter agreed, but his heart wasn't in it. He rushed the work. He used cheaper materials, cut corners, delegated important tasks without proper oversight. It was his least careful job, sloppy compared to his usual standards. He just wanted it done. When the house was finished, he returned to the company owner. To his surprise, the owner handed him a key. "This house," the man said with a smile, "is my gift to you. Thank you for your years of service." The carpenter froze, ashamed, embarrassed. He had just built his own home with half-hearted effort. If he had only known, he would have done it differently. But now, it was too late. That house, careless, rushed, compromised, would be the one he and his family lived in. This story, of course, is not just about houses. It is about life. Each day, with every choice you make in how you speak, act, listen, forgive, or love, you are building your home. And someday, you will live in what you've built. If you construct your life from haste and anger, you will dwell in unrest. If you build with kindness, patience, humility, you will live in peace. We don't often see the impact of our daily decisions until much later, but by then, the foundation has been poured, the walls set. So live with care, because the life you create, the character you shape, the relationships you nourish, the compassion you show, becomes the house your soul will live in. And whether that house is warm or cold is up to you.